Welcome back to the channel. I'm JP and we're going to be talking about what makes a photo actually interesting. So lots of people can appreciate a good photo, but I bet you've never thought about what actually makes a photo good. And so that's why you're here, and that's why I spent loads of time doing research, because I also didn't know. So I'm going to share with you the fundamentals, how photographers take photos where you're like, that's so sick, as well as giving you a bit of firepower and a bit of kind of oomph in your answer when people say, so why'd you like that photo? I gotcha. Before we get started, please make the active decision to either engage with the like button or to violently ignore the dislike button. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. To kick things off, we need to understand how we see and also how that's different to how cameras see. There's a huge gap between what we see and what we think we see. Our brains are programmed and orientated for survival. We need to be as efficient as possible to help understand our environment and then to be able to process what's going on so we can then act and respond. So to make things even easier, our brains create a mental model of everything that we see. We know that this is a little camera because we've seen other cameras before, and that's what allows us to go through our days without really looking at things. This frees up mental capacity because instead of having to look and analyze everything, we can just go, oh yeah, that's a camera. And this free mental capacity allows us to think about other things like, how do I get career fulfillment at the age of 25? And we go about our day thinking that we're really seeing things and looking at the real world. But realistically, we're just applying these models. We just see the practical nature of the objects themselves. A photo is like, look at this. This is interesting. And it makes you look at whatever's in the photo differently. Because if someone is showing this to you, it must be of interest. And a good photographer is someone who continuously shows you interesting things and makes you start thinking about the world in a different way. So cameras see the world differently. This isn't me getting all woo-woo, being like, oh, cameras are so amazing, la 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 la. None of that. Our eyes see the world in 3D. We have two eyes and a supercomputer, which combines the images of both of our eyes and puts them together, creating one 3D image. Whereas a camera has a single eye, essentially. And this flattens things out into 2D. Photos make small things, or can make small things look big and big things look small, because it's harder to gauge the depth of the objects in the photo. Cameras also see differently to our eyes because our eyes see everything in focus. Our eyes dart around and focus on things super fast, which makes us think that everything that we see is in focus. And if you try and look at something without your eyes being in focus, you'll get a headache very quickly. And in photography, photographers choose what is in focus. And so that forces your attention to potentially a subject that you may have not originally paid attention to. As well as this, everything that we look at is correctly exposed, because as our eye looks around things, if it's dark, it will expand its pupil, and if it's bright, it will contract it, letting in more or less light to make sure everything is correctly exposed. As a camera captures one single exposure, it struggles to get the bright brights and the dark darks all visible in one photo. So there's a creative choice as to what you actually see in the photo that you wouldn't necessarily get in real life. So this is where photography becomes particularly interesting to me. So most people understand that photography and photos are just a snapshot of time, but why does that matter? Our eyes see a constant stream of images. These images, I guess, are orientated by what's grabbing our attention, and we can often become blinded to things outside of our attention. And even things within our attention, very few things of interest are still long enough for us to actually look at them and to study them. So one of photo's greatest strengths is it's able to show us a teeny slither of time, and it's able to point things out to us, what we may have missed in our perception of reality, or maybe even things that we failed to appreciate in the moment. And what's also super cool about photos, it makes us use our imagination. We start thinking what happened before the photo, what happened after the photo. There's so many different ways to interpret a photo, and that's what makes it also personal and makes it different from one another's perception. So the number one thing that piques my interest in photography is what's known as the frame. In real life, we can look around and we can do what we want. But when we see a photo, the photographer has chosen what goes into the photo and what's not in the photo. They've decided to put a finite edge around what you're able to look at, what you're able to see. And it's almost like a physical barrier as to what you're allowed to look at. And because it's all we can look at, and we've had all of our other senses removed, like our hearing, our smell, our taste, we then start to make connections between the different elements within the photo. And we start thinking about things in a way that we probably wouldn't have if they hadn't been put in the frame together. And because the photographer has essentially said, this is interesting, that's why I'm showing it to you, we get even more curious about why that photo is interesting. And it simplifies the world around us. It kind of breaks down the vast picture of what is life and what is the world into a thin, manageable slice that you can just easily digest and that you can think about this one little moment. And another way it can trigger our imagination is we can see an image where clearly something's happening outside of the frame, but it's not included. So we start thinking about what was going on. And all these little things make us really involved and interested in what's going on. And that's what I think makes photography really interesting. To me, I love seeing a photographer take a beautiful photo of a scene that makes me think, oh my God, that is so sick. And it makes me really curious, like how can myself and someone else have exactly the same experience as to life and this one moment, yet they're able to see a completely different experience, a different side of life. Photos are like a memory prompt. If you had a photo that you personally took or that you were involved with, chances are, as soon as you see that image, you are instantly transported to that place, to that moment. I love that it's just like it unlocks a deep part of your brain that is otherwise like sedentary and just goes, and then instantly you're back in that moment. Some photos also communicate a very specific message. If you're aware of it, it will immediately shout out to you and you will instantly understand it. Whereas others will look at it and have no idea. They won't see the wider context of the image that it's trying to describe. And that's, in my opinion, what makes photos so special. I hope this has given you an insight into what actually makes a photo interesting for you to go out into the world and tell your mates, tell your partner, tell everyone, if they care. If they don't, maybe don't tell them. Of course, if you've got this far, you've either been threatened to watch it or you actually like the video. Share the love by liking, subscribing. If you're feeling super generous, share it. And until next time, peace.